Hey guys, I wanted to make a quick follow-up video to our previous Wonderlands video, the Death Knight. After taking the original build into Chaos 35 Elite mode, I realized that we could make some major improvements and synergies with the new Coiled Captors DLC rewards. This is a DLC setup, which means if you do not own Coiled Captors, you will not be able to run this build. Like our previous Death Knight guide, this loadout offers high survivability, respectable gun damage featuring ice and lightning damage for a melee brawler playstyle. Disclaimer, this is not a one-shot arsenal or boss mount guide. This build is designed to complete Chaos 35 Elite mode without dying in a tolerable and time-efficient manner. I would not describe this build as competitive, but it is certainly nearing endgame as we get Chaos 35 Elite on farm. We stress-tested this build running Chaos 35 Extended on Elite and Intense difficulty, only taking curses from Dragonlord without any Queen buffs or Altar buffs. The footage used in this video is from our stress testing. With that out of the way, let's dive into our updated build, the Storm Dragon. The key gun in our build is the Livewire. The Livewire is a legendary submachine gun which will proc arcing lightning every 2 melee swings. The interesting thing about the Livewire is that the proc is considered gun damage, so it will benefit from perks such as Oath of Fire. This will enable you to reliably proc the crit damage half of Awe without using a fire weapon or fire spell. We are also able to get 10% crit damage on our Livewire, which synergizes great with the Clawbringer's Awe ability, which increases crit chance and crit damage. The Livewire enchantment is plus 30% lightning on spellcast, as I wanted to avoid polarizing totally into melee to handle situational encounters where melee will be at a disadvantage. The Livewire will be your main source of damage during general mobbing. For boss fights, we use the Tootherator as a bonus of plus 5% melee damage per bullet stuck in target, combined with a 9 bullet per shot spread, gives us a 45% melee damage bonus against affected targets. I would love to get a 30% melee damage on spellcast on the sniper rifle, but sadly it is currently bugged and cannot be enchanted. Outside of the Livewire and Tootherator, we have a mix of different guns depending on what the boss is weak or resistant to, and if the boss can be safely meleeed without instantly dying. Important side note, we use the Umbral Gluttony to burst down badass targets and bosses, and we always save pistol ammo to use the Gluttony during Fight for Your Soul. We have collected a horde of guns of different elements shown on the screen for you to use situationally. It should be explicitly stated that this build is intended to be a melee build, which means our gun damage will be moderate at best. You should always consider switching your points in Oath of Thunder back into Oath of Fire for raid bosses or bosses strong against melee builds, such as Nightmare. We have enough lightning damage to pass Wastard and drill DPS checks. For melee, we are still rocking the Ice Fatebreaker with the Chilling enchantment for plus 30% frost damage on spellcast and warrior modification for stacking damage reduction and melee damage, which synergizes very nicely with Rebuke and Oath of Thunder. The Shield Restore perk of the Fatebreaker is essential for this build as we have no health sustain outside of low passive health regeneration. The Fatebreaker also provides great crowd control for its ability to stagger most enemies in the game on hit, and with enough damage can even stagger bosses such as the Dragon Lord. We also have a Twin Soul with ice damage and vampire as an alternative to the Fatebreaker for situations that require standing in pure damage, such as drill melee strats. We still have the Gluttony Skulldugger with Slap for plus 80% melee, but in my experience the utility of Livewire is more important in most situations than single target damage. Even on boss fights, because the Livewire proc will kill enemies during the fight for your soul, allowing you to stay on the boss. Lastly, for melee, we have a volatile Wailing Banshee of edginess if you would like to change the build into a more DPS-oriented burst damage setup. With shields, we have tested with several different ideas, from the Static Charge to the Master Rune and Spirit Rune, and from personal experience I am leaning heavily toward the Hammer and Anvil. The hammers do melee damage, so they should benefit from melee perks, and they can crit, which synergizes nicely with Awe. We were finally able to get a volatile Voltaic Hammer and Anvil with plus ward capacity, which gives us a perfect balance between damage and survivability. Running unarmored defense in Radiance gives us a whopping 19k health, and with the Fatebreaker and Harbinger Shield Restore, you will be proccing hammers quite often while staying in the fray during combat. With the enchantment, we are doing 50% lightning on action skill active, which synergizes nicely with our 30% lightning on spell from Livewire. Special shout out to the Ancient Deity. It gives plus 10% lightning damage, melee damage on ward break. My only problem with the deity is the minus 20% physical damage reduction debuff you take and the low ward capacity. For spells, we are using the Dark Slap and Buffmeister with Bonk and Pew for bonus melee damage on action start, with bonus melee and gun damage on spell cast. Remember, Livewire procs are gun damage, so a Pew modifier on Buffmeister will increase our Livewire melee procs. The dark damage helps us slightly with survivability, and we get a nice movement speed boost from the Buffmeister. The Pew perk also helps with bosses where melee is not an easy option. We're also still running a Tidebreaker for the Soak debuff to increase our lightning and ice damage, but through testing I'm leaning toward the Buffmeister. For amulets, the Harbinger is still, in my opinion, one of the best Clawbringer amulets because we will be restoring 50% of our shield every hammer throw with a low cooldown. Combining with the Fatebreaker, this makes the Clawbringer insanely tanky and hard to kill. I have also picked up a Slip and Stun for Clawbringer for the bonus melee and lightning damage, but in my opinion, at Elite Chaos 35, Harbinger Sustain is much more important than a gimmicky melee bonus that does not even apply to Storm Dragon's Judgment. For rings, we have collected the Shark's Bane for 2 30% gun damage buffs. This will help our gun damage on boss fights and still provides melee damage through Livewire procs. Additionally, we have 2 Sharkolescent rings for melee damage and plus 15 bonus melee damage of a random element, though after personal testing, I think the Shark's Banes are overall better. We also have 2 Elder Wyvern rings if you would like to respec the build into gun damage and fire damage, as Clawbringer will gain bonus crit damage with fire element. Bear in mind, Soak debuff will make the enemy take minus 50% fire damage, so accommodate accordingly. For class mod, we are running the Cape of Tides with bonus Rebuke, Oath of Thunder, and Clawbringer power. The Soak debuff duration bonus is very nice and allows us to run Buffmeister instead of Tidebreaker for spell for better overall optimization. We also have our Corrupted Plate Mail if you would like to lean into dark magic or use fire damage build instead. For key abilities, this build uses Storm Dragon's Judgment active, as it does melee damage on the initial hit, and then lightning ability damage for the remaining active. We have a 50% lightning damage bonus from the Voltaic enchantment if we choose to leave it out, or we can spam it in favor of restoring 50% of our shield constantly with the Harbinger Amulet. The Soaked bonus from Cape of Tides will also amplify the damage of Storm Dragon's Judgment. I am also spotlighting off from the Clawbringer tree because our lightning damage will proc critical hit chance. With 1 point in Oath of Fire, we will also be consistently proccing bonus crit damage from Livewire AoE. Nearly everything else in the build you can pick and choose, while I personally prefer bonus frost damage, melee damage, and unarmored defense. This perk combined with Radiance will give Clawbringers moderate wards and high health to make them very tanky. Finally, we take Relentless Rage because in high chaos mode damage scales very wildly, and it's nice to spam the Gluttony during the fight for your soul to nearly guarantee a res if we can pass the DPS check. It's ultimately up to you if you want to run Clawbringer Capstone, Berserker Capstone, or neither for a more hybridized build. Since I am running nothing but Clawbringer power on the Amulet and the class mod, I decided to go with Blasphemous Favor and the Capstone and the Clawbringer tree to just try to get the most out of my kit. For areas of improvement, I think I would prefer 30% melee damage on our Livewire, but I wanted to stay well-rounded enough to use lightning-based gun damage in case the boss is outside of melee range, or will one-shot a melee build through insane Chaos Mode damage scaling. I'd prefer an Ice or Lightning Buffmeister with Bonk and Kachow for max melee and Storm Dragon Judgment damage, but I enjoyed the Dark damage to help our sustainability. All of the gear could also be Primordial, but who cares? When they release Chaos 45 or whatever, the chance for a Primordial will be higher and we can grind that out then, not now. I'm happy with our Fatebreaker, but we could use Echo or Amped instead of Warrior for boss fights. Vampire would also be very nice, but I could only get my hands on a normal Lightning Vampire Fatebreaker without Volatile modifier. The damage is too low to use. I also enjoy the damage reduction and damage increase from Warrior. Ice damage is also very close to a godly one. We could definitely get some better rings, as the Shark's Bane 30% gun damage is most likely a bug that will get fixed. Ideally, we would have 2 mood rings with bonus melee and melee crit damage modifiers. Lastly, the Cave of the Tides with plus Awe would take the build to the next level, but that will require a few more tens of 100 hours of grinding. Like before, we do have a save file available if you would like to play the build without grinding. Head over to twitch.tv/spacedragy and follow the channel. Type !StormDragon in the chat, no space, and it will provide a URL to the Google Drive for the save file. Our channel is repeatedly swarmed by bots when we are not in follower-only mode, so I apologize for the inconvenience. Following is free and does not cost anything, but you will need a Twitch account. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that your progs to Chaos 35 go well, and loot luck is always in your favor. Happy hunting!